in the 2012 is still remarkably like it was in 1912.
It's not going to happen overnight. People aren't going to change the way that they operate.
The cake is big enough to divide up.
The industry can't just stand still. People think it doesn't happen. It happens all the time.
That can't be the future for racing.
What changes and reforms would you introduce?
What we've got to do is to try and change things in such a way that racing once again stabilises its position as one of the major sporting industries.
Sir Alan Meale, Labour MP for Mansfield since 1987, Junior Government Minister in the 1990s, Chairman of the All-Party Racing and Bloodstock Committee and involved with breeding and racehorse-owning syndicates. A constant critic of the old aristocratic, self-electing ruling jockey club, he led the campaign which resulted in subsequent racing authorities, culminating now with the BHA, the British Horse Racing Authority. Sir Alan, welcome to King for the Day. You're racing's dictator. What changes and reforms would you introduce?
Well, first of all, you've got to say that over the last 25 years there's been major reshuffles within racing itself. It's faced many problems, but it's also come up trumps on many things in relation to the introduced all-weather racing, for instance. They've stabilised some of the major courses within the country, but yet again they're still facing the same major difficulty over finance and management of the country. Paul Bitar has come on the scene, quite recently, and he's clearly doing a very good job at the moment. But I say much more structurally needs to be done if the industry is going to move forward and is able to compete with other sports which are gaining momentum. If you watch the Olympics, the Paralympics, you've seen all the stuff and all the progress has been made in areas like cycling and swimming and so on and so forth. And that will continue till to Brazil and beyond. And what we've got to do is to try and change things in such a way that racing once again stabilises its position as one of the major sporting industries in the UK.
But since you led the campaign, you launched the campaign to get rid of the jockey club's ruling powers, right. Has the industry really improved, or is the factionalism in it and the division and the arguments, they're the same as ever, aren't they?
Well, they are, actually, and this is, what's totally destabilising. We've moved the chess around the board a little bit, but we've come up with no solution. There's no grand plan. There's no even grand master actually been shuffling these pawns around. I mean, what we have to do is much more and bring the industry together, which other sports are doing, and that's why they're making great momentum at the present time. We've seen the best example of that is the Premier League, which is a brand new invention, in football, and now it has income every year now of £2.6 billion.
But it's a different industry, Alan, isn't it? But tens of thousands of people aren't flocking to racecourses all the time.
Well, no, but they used to. And what one has to say, they don't do that now. And indeed, before the Premier League was formed, one of the major reasons that it was formed, Dave Richards always comments upon this, is that football was losing its audience, and it had to safeguard its audience at home in the individual teams in the original stadium, but also to sell that audience abroad and get a much wider spectrum. In 93% of Manchester United supporters in the world will never see a game. That's what we're talking about, and that's where racing has been in the past and what should be in the future.
That's pie in the sky, Alan. We're never going to get racing, never going to be on a par, even thinking of it, with soccer around the world. Never.
Well, you say. I mean, they would have said in those days that was the case with football. But look, you're telling me that the Cup Final and the Grand National don't have the same pull. You're telling me the Derby doesn't have the same pull. The 2000 Guineas, the St Ledger, all of those. Some of them less important now than they have been in the past. But they offer a great opportunity for a platform for success.
Everyone who's taken over racing and run it, Jockey Club and people since, have all said unity, we must get together. How on earth are these diverse interests going to be brought together under your plan as dictator?
Well, there's lots of success examples, in respect when you've got your management right, whether it be in private business or in industry, where they work, where people come together, and you get the right board to take the decisions, to make the investments that take the industry forward. And I believe if you've got that success, what that builds with it is people will be quite quite satisfied that you're in charge and you run it. Nobody will ever be 100% satisfied in things, but what we have to do is to create a management structure that people believe in and will give it the opportunity to succeed. And that's done every day in business, and all we've got to do is to put it right. Let people have confidence in the management of the sport, and I believe that we can do that.
Fixtures are a key issue in racing. Should the ruling British Horse Racing Authority decide fixtures, or should the racecourses themselves, obviously private companies as they are, should they decide when they're going to race?
It's got to be in partnership not only with them but also anybody who's running racing, because there is disparity between north and south, between courses which are owned by one particular group and another, who get all the TV, get all the larger prize money races and the rest of it. And you can see that if you were to spread that better around Britain, it would sell your product much better, and I believe would increase audiences and the rest. Perhaps you don't need to put 3 or 4 of the same events on the same race day meeting. Perhaps one would do, but certainly there needs to be a commission and an inquiry amongst racing to see how we can better use the fixtures, and as I say, stop this divide between one geographical area and another.
Talking about a business approach, I've always been in favour of Sunday racing. Right round the world, big sports take place Saturday and Sunday. You exclude the, say, the Melbourne Cup first Tuesday in November, but all events at the weekends. We have a top-heavy Saturday fixtures with all the best races on the Saturday now, rather than less in midweek. But Sunday is virtually ignored. What would you do to really bring up Sunday racing where most people can go racing?
Well, as you know, John, I was involved in getting Sunday racing approved, and was very, very supportive of that, and was at the first...
and the opening of betting shops as well.
And was at those meetings when they first transpired. I believe racing has been missing a beat. If you look at France and you look at United States and
Ireland,
elsewhere, yeah, that's right, where it is tremendous. It's much more the better day for racing. And what you've got to do, you've got to invest in that. That means you reshuffling around some of these major events. It means you put money into the racecourses so there can be a much more party and festival event, so people will visit. And I believe they will do. Everywhere it occurs where the money and the expertise and the management is put into, it actually works. And I say the best example of that is France and Ireland, and as you rightly point out.
The key to all activities, racing no exception, is finance.
Yeah.
Now, what would you do about racing finances, which is based now largely on the levy system, which is a tax on bookmakers' turnover?
Well, so far nobody's found anything which is more successful and more able to redistribute than the levy. And until something is, it should continue. However, I think it's a completely unsatisfactory system. I think a price needs to be paid for the product wherever that is used, and it should be gained and sent back to the centre and redistributed that way within racing. But, you know, there are also tricks and which, if we don't address them, are going to get worse and worse and worse, and actually draw the lifeblood out of the sport, and that is internet betting. Now, I'm a politician, and I can tell you that I believe it is easy to actually combat the threat of internet. You have British companies which have moved abroad, by and large, which are operating from British customers who are paying their bets or their investments via British banks. Now, you can get hold of that. What you have to do is to have the will and take it serious enough to do it. And I believe that, you know, the present government and the previous government, I believe, let down racing badly by not handing over the tote to the industry into a trust. They thought of another way to do it, and I don't think that was fair on the industry, who I believe owned it. I think they've always owned it.
But that's a battle lost now, isn't it?
It is a battle lost, but you can build financial structures without that in the product itself. I believe internet is the major challenge at the moment, because it is going to be a growing mechanism which will be the major one which is used for betting. And money, I think, in the next 10 years is going to change dramatically. That will mean, you know, much more futuristic money type payment schemes, which is bound to involve the internet and the speed of that. So we have to get a grip of that. And but I believe that government should if it does nothing else for racing and British industry, should address the whole aspect of internet payments. And if they do that, they can easily, if they've got the will to do it, they can not only get partners in Europe and the rest of the world to agree with them, but they can get it at source. These are customers. These companies are not going to operate abroad if they don't have the customers. We know where the customers are paying from these. They're paying through bank accounts, British bank accounts. They can be got at. If you can deduct money from bank accounts at source by a tax collector, Majesty's Revenue and Customs, then you can do it, you know, in this way. All you've got to do is to create the mechanism to do so. Some people will say, well, they'll find ways of avoiding. Of course they will, but they have assets here and abroad which you can grab. People are always trying to avoid taxation, but they don't. And what you've got to do is to build a system which has a charge, which is nominal for the customer to pay it, to go back into racing for the product. But if people actually avoid paying that charge and are caught at it, additional charges can be levied on that, and Majesty's Customs and Excise can benefit from that. They do that now in the high street, and in business and in industry, and with individuals. And what we've got to do is to do that. It's how the civilised world operates, and believe me, racing can exist within that.